This crowd will kill us all. We do this, we kill it. He's right! We have to!
Okay.
Leave that dying animal behind. It's slowing us down. We'll all freeze to death because of your stupidity. A father screamed at his young daughter in the middle of a deadly mountain storm. They were lost, exhausted, and running out of time. The girl had found a dying sheep in the snow and refused to abandon it. Everyone said she was foolish. Everyone said the sheep would kill them all. But that night, when the deadliest landslide in 50 years came roaring down the mountain, that dying sheep led them to the only shelter that could save their lives. The animal they almost left behind became the miracle they desperately needed. This is the story of a lost family, a dying sheep, and the night that proved God speaks through the creatures we almost abandoned. In a small mountain village, where snow covered the peaks for 8 months of the year and survival was never guaranteed, there lived a family of 5. The father was named Henrik, a 45-year-old man with a thick beard, weathered hands, and a heart hardened by decades of difficult living. His wife, Elena, was 42, a gentle woman whose kindness had been slowly crushed by years of poverty and her husband's growing bitterness. They had 3 children. Marcus, the oldest at 17, already showing signs of his father's harshness. Sofia, the middle child at 12, with her mother's gentle heart and an unusual connection to animals. And Leda Thomas, only 6 years old, too young to understand the tensions that fractured his family. Henrik had not always been a hard man. In his youth, he had been known for his laughter, his generosity, his willingness to help any neighbor in need. But life in the mountains was unforgiving. 3 failed harvests in a row had driven the family deep into debt. Henrik's brother had cheated him out of an inheritance that should have saved him. And 2 years ago, their home had been partially destroyed by an avalanche, forcing them to rebuild with money they didn't have. Each blow had taken something from Henrik, until the man who remained was more stone than flesh. He blamed God for their misfortunes. He blamed the mountains. He blamed everyone except himself. And increasingly, he took out his frustrations on his family, especially on Sofia the dreamer, the one who seemed to live in a world of fantasy and hope that Henrik had long since abandoned. She reminded him too much of who he used to be, and that reminder was painful. Sofia was different from the rest of her family. While Marcus learned to be hard like his father, and Thomas was too young to understand, Sofia remained soft in a world that demanded toughness. She cried when animals were slaughtered. She prayed for strangers she had never met. She believed, with absolute certainty, that there was good in everything and everyone, even when evidence suggested otherwise. The villagers called her simple. Her father called her foolish. Her brother called her weak. But her mother saw something else in those gentle eyes. She saw a strength of a different kind. The strength to remain kind in a cruel world. The strength to hope when hope seemed pointless. The strength to love what others despised. Elena would often whisper to Sofia when they were alone, "Don't let them change you. The world needs people who see beauty in broken things. Remember that, my daughter?" Always remember. Sofia remembered. She held those words close to her heart like a talisman against the coldness that surrounded her. The trouble began on a November morning when Henrik announced that they would be traveling to the neighboring village to sell their remaining livestock. It was a 3-day journey through treacherous mountain passes. But the family was desperate. They needed the money to survive the winter. They would take the mountain route, which was shorter but more dangerous. Henrik didn't care about the danger. He had stopped caring about anything except survival. Elena protested. The weather reports warned of storms. The mountain route was impassable if snow came. They should wait a few days. Henrik dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. "We don't have a few days. We leave at dawn." And so they did. Henrik, Elena, Marcus, Sofia, and little Thomas set out before sunrise, leading a small cart pulled by their old horse. The cart carried everything they had left to sell. Their last 3 goats, a dozen chickens, some handmade blankets Elena had spent months weaving. It wasn't much, but it was everything. The first day of travel was difficult but uneventful. The mountain path wound through forests of pine and spruce, crossing frozen streams and climbing steadily higher. Thomas rode in the cart, too small for the difficult terrain. Marcus walked ahead with his father, already learning to be a man. Elena and Sofia walked behind, speaking softly about things that fathers and sons never discussed. By the second day, the weather began to change. Clouds gathered around the peaks like angry spirits. The temperature dropped sharply. Henrik pushed them harder, determined to reach the pass before the storm hit. But the mountains had their own timeline, and they didn't care about Henrik's plans. The storm struck in the early afternoon, appearing so quickly that there was no time to find shelter. One moment, the sky was gray but passable. The next, they were engulfed in a whiteout of screaming wind and blinding snow. Visibility dropped to nearly zero. The temperature plummeted, and the family found themselves trapped in the deadliest storm the region had seen in a decade. Henrik made a terrible decision. Instead of stopping and waiting out the storm, he pushed forward, convinced that they were close to a shelter he remembered from years past. But his memory was faulty, corrupted by time and desperation. He led them off the main path, down a side route that wound deeper into the mountains, further from safety, closer to disaster. They walked for hours through the blinding snow. Thomas was crying from cold and fear. Elena was struggling to keep up. Even Marcus, young and strong, was showing signs of exhaustion. And Henrik, the leader who had led them into this nightmare, refused to admit he was lost. Refused to admit he had made a mistake. Refused to stop, even as his family fell apart around him. It was Sofia who first saw the sheep. They had stumbled into a small ravine, somewhat sheltered from the wind but rapidly filling with snow. And there, huddled against a rock, was a sheep. It was clearly dying. Its wool was matted with ice. Its breathing was shallow and labored. Its eyes were half closed, already surrendering to the cold that would soon claim it. "Papa! Look!" Sofia cried, rushing toward the animal. "We have to help it." Henrik barely glanced at the creature. "Leave it. It's almost dead. Keep moving." But Sofia had already knelt beside the sheep, already wrapped her arms around its trembling body, already decided that she would not abandon this creature to die alone. "Sofia," her father's voice was sharp with warning. "I said leave it. We don't have time for this." "I won't," Sofia said quietly but firmly. "I won't leave it to die." Henrik's face twisted with rage. He marched toward his daughter, grabbed her arm, and tried to pull her away. "The sheep is dead, or it will be. We need to keep moving, or we will die. Do you understand that? Your sentiment will kill this family." Sofia looked up at her father with eyes that held no fear, only a sadness that seemed far too old for a 12-year-old girl. "Then let me die with it," she said, "because I won't become someone who walks past suffering just to save myself." The words hit Henrik like a physical blow. For a moment, he saw himself through his daughter's eyes. He saw the hard, bitter man he had become. He saw the kindness he had buried, the hope he had abandoned, the love he had crushed beneath the weight of his own suffering. Elena stepped forward and put her hand on her husband's arm. "Henrik, she's right. We've been walking for hours, and we're no closer to shelter. The storm's getting worse. Maybe this is a sign. Maybe we should stay here, at least until the wind dies down." Henrik wanted to argue. He wanted to scream that there were no signs, no meanings, no God watching over them. But his body was exhausted. His mind was foggy, and somewhere deep inside, in a place he had tried to wall off years ago, a small voice whispered, "Listen to her." "Fine," he growled. "We stay. But when that sheep dies, and we're still stuck here, remember, it was your choice." Sofia ignored her father's bitterness. She was already focused on the sheep, rubbing its wool, trying to generate warmth, whispering soft words of comfort into its ear. "It's okay," she murmured. "I've got you. You're not alone anymore." The sheep's eyes opened slightly, and it looked at Sofia with an expression that seemed almost human. Grateful, trusting, as if it had been waiting for her. As if their meeting in this frozen ravine was not accident, but destiny. The family huddled together against the rock face, using the cart and their blankets to create a makeshift shelter. The storm raged around them, but in their small, protected space, they were surviving. Henrik sat apart from the others, his face a mask of resentment. Marcus sat beside him, adopting his father's posture. Elena held Thomas close, keeping him warm, and Sofia sat with the dying sheep, never once letting go. Hours passed. The storm showed no sign of stopping. Night fell, bringing a deeper cold that seemed to seep into their very bones. Henrik had stopped speaking entirely, his silence heavier than any words. Elena prayed quietly, her lips moving without sound. Thomas fell into a fitful sleep. Marcus kept looking at his father, as if waiting for instructions that never came. And then the sheep did something unexpected. It stood up. Sofia gasped as the animal that had been near death suddenly rose on trembling legs. Its eyes were brighter now, more alert. It looked directly at Sofia, then turned and looked toward the eastern slope of the ravine. It started walking. Sofia said urgently, "The sheep. It's moving." Henrik looked up with dead eyes. "So what?" "Let it walk off a cliff for all I care." But Sofia was already following the animal. It moved slowly, weakly, but with unmistakable purpose. It knew where it was going. "Sofia, get back here!" Henrik shouted. "You'll get lost in the storm." But Sofia didn't stop, and Elena, trusting her daughter's instincts more than her husband's bitterness, grabbed Thomas and followed. Marcus hesitated, caught between his father and the rest of his family. Then, with a conflicted expression, he followed his mother. Henrik was left alone in the makeshift shelter. He could hear his family's voices fading into the storm. He could feel the cold, biting deeper, and he could feel something else. Something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not of dying, but of being left behind. Of being abandoned, because he had abandoned everything that mattered. He stood up and followed. The sheep led them through the blinding snow, navigating terrain that should have been impossible to travel. It seemed to know exactly where it was going, avoiding dangerous drops, finding paths where none appeared to exist. Sofia stayed close behind it, her hand occasionally touching its wool, guiding it, being guided by it. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the sheep stopped in front of a dark opening in the rock face. A cave, large enough for all of them, sheltered from the wind and snow, invisible from even a few feet away. "Oh my God," Elena breathed. "How did it know?" The family rushed into the cave, escaping the deadly storm that had nearly killed them. The interior was dry and surprisingly warm, the rock retaining heat in a way that the open air could not. There was even a small pile of old firewood left by some previous traveler, along with a stone fire pit. Henrik's hands were shaking as he struck flint against steel, trying to create a spark. His fingers were numb, his coordination failing. Spark fell dead. And then Sofia knelt beside him, her small hand steadying his, and together they struck a flame that caught on the dry kindling and blossomed into life-giving fire. The warmth spread through the cave, pushing back the cold that had been slowly killing them. Thomas stopped shivering. Elena began to cry quietly, tears of relief and gratitude. Marcus sat in silence, something shifting behind his eyes, and Henrik stared at the fire, at his daughter's hands, at the sheep that had led them to salvation. "How did it know?" Henrik whispered, echoing Elena's question. How could it possibly know this cave was here? Sofia stroked the sheep's wool gently. The animal had collapsed beside the fire, its burst of energy spent. It was dying again, perhaps more quickly now that its purpose had been fulfilled. "Maybe it didn't know," Sofia said softly. "Maybe it was just walking, and something else was guiding it." Henrik looked at his daughter, really looked at her. For the first time in years, he saw the kindness he had tried to crush, the faith he had mocked, the love he had rejected, and he felt something crack inside his chest, something that had been frozen for too long. Before he could speak, the mountain spoke instead. A rumble, low at first, then building to a roar that shook the walls of the cave. The family scrambled deeper inside, pressing against the back wall, as the sound grew louder, closer, more terrifying. "Landslide!" Henrik screamed. "Get back." The world outside the cave exploded. Rocks, snow, trees, everything came thundering down the mountainside in a deadly wave of destruction. The ground shook violently. Dust and debris flew into the cave entrance. Thomas screamed. Elena covered him with her body. Marcus grabbed Sofia and pulled her against the wall. And then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Henrik crawled toward the cave entrance, coughing on dust, his heart pounding. What he saw made his blood run cold. The ravine where they had been sheltering was gone, buried under tons of rock and snow. The makeshift shelter they had created against the rock face had been completely destroyed. If they had stayed there, if Sofia hadn't followed the sheep, if they hadn't found this cave, they would all be dead. Henrik fell to his knees. His body began to shake, not from cold, but from the weight of realization crashing down on him. Elena approached him slowly and put her hand on his shoulder. Henrik. He turned to look at her, and his face was wet with tears. The first tears he had shed in years. We would have died, he choked out. If not for Sofia. If not for that sheep, we would all be buried under that rock. He turned to look at his daughter, who was still cradling the dying sheep in her arms. The animal's breathing was barely perceptible now. Its eyes were closing. Its journey was almost over. Henrik crawled across the cave floor to his daughter. He looked at the sheep, at the creature he had called worthless, at the life he had demanded they abandon. "I'm sorry," he whispered, to the sheep, to Sofia, to Elena, to Marcus, to Thomas, to God, to everyone he had ever wronged with his bitterness and blindness. "I'm so sorry." Sofia looked at her father with the same gentle eyes she had always had, the same eyes that saw good in broken things. "It's okay, Papa. The sheep forgives you, and so do I." Henrik broke down completely then, sobbing like a child. All the walls he had built over years of hardship crumbling in an instant. Elena held him, crying herself. Marcus watched with tears streaming down his face, something hard inside him softening for the first time. And Thomas, too young to understand, but old enough to feel, crawled into the family embrace. In the center of it all, Sofia held the dying sheep. "Thank you," she whispered to it. "Thank you for saving us. Thank you for not giving up." The sheep looked at her one last time. Its eyes were peaceful now, free of pain. It let out a soft sound, almost like a sigh of contentment. And then, surrounded by warmth and love, it closed its eyes and was still. The storm raged all night, but inside the cave, the family was safe. They sat around the fire, closer than they had been in years, and talked. Really talked. Henrik confessed the bitterness that had poisoned him. Elena shared the loneliness she had felt. Marcus admitted that he had been afraid of becoming like his father. And Sofia, sweet Sofia, simply listened and loved them through it all. When dawn finally broke and the storm cleared, the family emerged from the cave to find a world transformed. The landslide had completely altered the landscape. What had been a passable route was now a wall of rubble. They were trapped on this side of the mountain with no way to reach the neighboring village. But they were alive. Henrik looked at the destruction and, for the first time, felt not despair but gratitude. He had almost lost everything that mattered, chasing money that didn't. He had almost sacrificed his family on the altar of his own bitterness. But a dying sheep had saved them. A creature everyone else would have abandoned had led them to salvation. They built a small marker for the sheep outside the cave, using stones gathered from the surrounding area. Henrik worked alongside Sofia, placing each stone with care, his rough hands gentle for the first time in years. "She deserved a name," Sofia said softly as they finished. Henrik nodded. "What would you like to call her?" Sofia thought for a moment. "Grace." Her name was Grace. Henrik smiled through his tears. "Grace. It's perfect." They were rescued 3 days later by a search party from their village. The story of their survival spread quickly, growing into legend with each telling. The family that had been saved by a dying sheep. The miracle in the mountains. The night the landslide killed everyone except those who followed an animal to shelter. Some said it was luck. Some said it was coincidence. But those who knew the family, who saw the transformation in Henrik's eyes, who witnessed the love that had been rekindled among them, knew it was something more. It was Grace. Henrik returned to the village a changed man. He repaid his debt slowly, honestly, without the bitter resentment that had poisoned him before. He reconciled with his brother, offering forgiveness that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. He stopped blaming God for his hardships and started thanking him for his blessings. He became the man he used to be, the man who laughed, who helped neighbors, who saw beauty in the world, the man his daughter had always seen, even when he couldn't see himself. Sofia grew up to become a healer, tending to both animals and humans with the same gentle touch she had shown that dying sheep. People came from far away to seek her help, drawn by stories of her gift. She never turned anyone away. She never abandoned anything that was suffering. And every year, on the anniversary of that terrible, beautiful night, the family would return to the mountain. They would hike to the cave that had saved their lives, now marked with a small shrine built by grateful hands. They would light a fire, just as they had that night, and they would remember. They would remember the storm that almost killed them. They would remember the sheep that saved them. They would remember the lesson that changed them forever. Henrik would tell the story to his grandchildren, years later, with tears in his eyes and joy in his heart. "We were lost," he would say. "Lost in the storm, lost in our bitterness, lost in our fear. We had forgotten how to love, how to trust, how to see the sacred in small things. And then a dying sheep showed us the way, not just to a cave, but to each other, to ourselves, to everything that actually matters." The children would listen with wide eyes, and they would ask, "But how did the sheep know? Grandpa, how did it find the cave?" And Henrik would smile, the smile of a man who had learned the hardest lesson in the softest way. "It didn't know," he would say. "It was just a sheep, following an instinct it didn't understand. But God knew. God placed that sheep in our path. God gave Sofia the heart to save it. God used a dying creature to save a dying family, because that's what grace does. It finds us when we're lost. It leads us when we can't see. It saves us through the very things we almost throw away." He would look at Sofia then, his daughter who had become his teacher, and his eyes would fill with love. "Never abandon the dying," he would say. "Never dismiss the weak. Never assume you know what's worthless and what's precious, because sometimes the thing you almost leave behind is the very thing that saves your life." And Sofia would nod, remembering a cold night in a mountain storm, remembering a sheep named Grace, remembering the moment her father's frozen heart finally thawed. She never forgot the lesson. None of them did, and neither should you. Because somewhere in your life, there is a dying sheep. Something or someone the world tells you to abandon. Something that seems too weak to matter, too broken to save, too far gone to help. Don't walk past it. Don't leave it behind. You never know. That dying sheep might be the miracle you've been waiting for. That broken thing might be the very thing that saves you. And the grace you show to the helpless might be the grace that leads you home. Friends, if this story touched your heart, drop a comment telling me what lesson it taught you. Let me know what country you're watching from. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this one. There's more waiting for you right on your screen. Thank you for staying with me until the very end.